So I thought it would be good for us to spend a little time and do a little series called, I'm calling it Classic Gospel, on trying to answer the questions that we see expressed in contemporary society by the artists. Now, when we think about rock and roll, this is the typical image that comes to mind. We think of someone who's living in perpetual rebellion, that embraces death, is all tatted up, and they just want to live an alternative lifestyle. And certainly there's a truth to that. But I think that's an expression of the lostness, of the emptiness, of the pursuit that is expressed in the music. And rather than condemning this kind of culture and the pursuit of these kinds of questions, I think we would do well to listen to what Francis Schaeffer had to say. When describing the pessimism and the nihilism expressed in so many movies, paintings, and popular songs, he, that is Schaeffer, demonstrated profound empathy for those actually living in such despair. These works of art are the expression of men who are struggling with their appalling lostness, he wrote. Dare we laugh at such things? Dare we feel superior when we view their tortured expressions in their art? The men and women who produce these things are dying while they live, yet where is our compassion for them? We need to understand the background. We need to be able to engage with art and with artists. And I think we would be wise as Christians, as we engage in life, that we become skilled in that. We be able to see beyond just the surface and resonate with the heart of the artist and ask, what is the turmoil here and how do we respond to them? This is our value statement, right? Our vision statement. We are compelled by love. We're convinced by faith. We're engaged in life. We looked at that a couple of weeks ago. How do we take this vision statement into a contemporary society that doesn't speak Christianese? How do we enter their world and engage with them and understand their questions so we can be a part of their life? So this is a song that they wrote trying to find that way to get out, because this is the question that they've been asking. I got to the passage, I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night men. We're programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. And what an ominous last line. You can never leave. Expectations. You order a sandwich or a burger someplace and you see what's on the sign, and what you really get is something radically different. A lot of people are constantly looking for that intersection between dreams and reality. And that's what drove the Eagles. And despite all their musical success and their popularity and the phenomenal amount of money that they've made over the years, they have resonated, and they've been very honest in saying it did not satisfy. They tried everything and it did not satisfy. So how do we deal with managing expectations? How do we find that place that we can go to and we don't want to leave? I think the psalmist had a very similar experience in Psalm 55. If you have your Bibles, let me encourage you to turn with me. Contextually, Psalm 55 is talking about a different issue, but it results in the same kind of a response. In Psalm 55, he has the same kind of anguish in his heart that we see represented in this song by the Eagles. He says, "Listen to my prayer, O God, do not ignore my plea." And we have all struggled with that from time to time when you are crying out to God because of the desperation of a scenario in your life, and you feel like that prayer is hitting the ceiling and coming right back. I assure you it is not, but it feels that way. We have all struggled with that from time to time. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught at the voice of my enemy, at the stares of the wicked, for they bring down suffering upon me and revile me in their anger. The people around me, God, are even judging me. So God, please do something. This is unbearable. I have checked in, but I can never leave. God, I need you to do something. Here's the cause of his problem. If you go down to verse 12. If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were raising himself against me, I could hide from him. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship as we walked with the throng to the house of God. The psalmist has been betrayed by his closest friend. And the reason he has this anguish in his heart is the person in whom he had placed great confidence has turned on him. And we don't know who it was. We don't know the scenario that caused it, but somebody has betrayed him. And there are few things in life more painful than betrayal. That sense of betrayal, when you have a close friend, someone in whom you've placed confidence, you've shared intimate secrets, you have allowed them to have a piece of your life, and then they have crushed it, causes phenomenal anguish. And to some sort of extent, one way or another, I'm sure we have all experienced that. We wonder, God, what are you doing? What is happening here? And all we can do then is to cry out to God and try to put some context and some perspective into this. So the desperation comes in verse 4. We'll get to here in just a minute. Verse 4, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death assail me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to the place of shelter, far from the tempest and the storm. God, I have checked in, but I want to leave, but I can't. God, I wish I could just go somewhere and get away from it all. There is something that resonates within us when we are stressed, when we are overwhelmed. Sometimes we just wish we could run away and leave it all behind. And we can understand the eagles. We feel like we've checked in, but you can leave anytime you want, but you really can't get away. And you feel trapped. And in this scenario, in Psalm 55, the psalmist, and whatever happened between him and his friend, he felt trapped. He was betrayed. He wanted to run away from it, and he says, God, why can you not fix this problem? So then he comes in verse 16, and he begins to have a change in his perspective, because it's not just a psychological game that he plays, but he begins to reinterpret what is happening through a perspective of the presence of God. In verse 1, he says, listen to my prayer, do not ignore me, hear me and answer me. And then there's that sense of desperation. By verse 16, he's starting to understand that, yes, God is there. I think in verse 1, he's feeling the emotion that, my prayer is bouncing off the ceiling. In verse 16, he's now starting to realize, no, God is engaged. God is a part of this. And he says, but I call out to God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon, I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me. God will give ear and humble them, he who is enthroned from old, because they do not change and do not fear God. Just a couple of the word pictures that he uses here, his anguish has not changed, but his perspective has. But notice how he portrays this betrayal that he has sensed from his friend. He says, he redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage. He feels like people, and he has said earlier in the psalm that others are looking at him as well, not just the friend that betrayed him, but others, that people are waging a war against him. And in the ancient times, in the time of David and the time of the Old Testament, when you went to war, it was a big deal. You just didn't go without any kind of planning. War was not like it is today. It required the dedication of resources. You had a limited number of warriors, adult men, and when they were gone, they were gone. It wasn't like replenishing a tank. You couldn't just build more. You had to wait another 25 or 30 years for the next group to grow up and to come along. So your intention to going to war was very significant. And that's why through the Old Testament stories we see this king making an alliance with another king, and the nations would get together, because seldom could one nation put together all the resources necessary to conquer a third party. So they would have to form alliances and get other people working with them. So based on that imagery, based on the idea that it took resources, it took intentionality, the psalmist says, I'm fighting this war. People are intentionally trying to hurt me. They're intentionally trying to destroy me. It's just not that I'm perceiving that my feelings are hurt. People are out to get me. He says, God, you've got to answer me. This betrayal is so significant in my life that it feels like people are intentionally trying to bring me down. And yet he says, I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice. God will give ear and humble them, he who is enthroned from old. So although he is very explicit in expressing the nature of his angst, he also begins to have this small glimmer of hope. And he says, God, you are engaged. I need to remember you are engaged and you are enthroned. Verse 17, evening and morning and noon, I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. Verse 19, God who is enthroned forever will hear them and afflict them. He is not only hearing my prayer, God is not only attentive and engaged to my life, but he is aware of the circumstances around me. But you know, the psalmist, he started out by saying, I want to escape. I want to go and fly away. At the end of this psalm, he does find an escape. In verses 22 to 23, it's not the kind of escape that we would have expected, but it's an even better escape. He says, cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall. But you, O God, will bring down the wicked into the pit of corruption. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men will live out half their days. But as for me, I will trust in you. So he finds ultimately his escape, not in running away, but in changing, again, part of his perspective and his context for what's happening. And he starts and he ends with two very similar statements. He says, cast your cares on the Lord, and he ends that section by saying, as for me, I will trust on the Lord. But the word picture that's used here, the vocabulary the psalmist uses, is not just about, when I think cast, I think about throwing something. Or tossing something away. But actually the word picture used by the psalmist here is one of abandonment. Abandon. Here's the baggage you've been carrying around. Here's that thing. Just abandon it. Walk away. Leave it with God. Just let it stay right there and keep on going, because he will look after that. You can walk away from it. So he does find his escape, not the escape by changing, running away literally to another place, but the word picture here, in contrast to running to another place, is simply running away from that thing and that is weighing you down. Realistically, it's very hard for any of us to say, okay, I'm just not going to let that bother me anymore. It'd be nice if it were that easy, but it's not. Rather, I think what the psalmist is saying is, I am going to change my focus. While that thing still exists, I'm going to change my focus, God, to acknowledge that you are engaged and you are enthroned, and I'm going to have that dominate my thoughts, not the thing that's causing all my stress. Yeah, this is overwhelming, and this betrayal is unlike anything I've experienced before, but God, as real as that is, even more real is the fact you are engaged and you are enthroned. So I will trust in you. I can't fix this, but I can change my perspective. God, I want to trust you because you're engaged and you are enthroned.